Man, you are crazy if you think that the top athletes in CrossFit are not using steroids and performance-enhancing drugs. So what I want to do is just have more today in this video, more like a podcast. I'm just shooting from the hip, talking about a topic that is actually one of my favorite topics to discuss, and that is steroids and performance-enhancing drugs in the sport of CrossFit. Now, you get opinions all across the board on this, and if you look back at videos in the CrossFit realm of where I think one of the CrossFit movies, one of the documentaries of the CrossFit Games that came out in maybe 2017. I mean, there was a few different times where different people would talk about steroids, and you know, and a lot of times the common theme from folks at CrossFit HQ, I've even heard Rich Froning say this in general, when they are questioned about steroids in the sport of CrossFit, they will defer back and say that, well, sure, steroids can help you get strong, but they're not going to help you tolerate pain. And they will use that type of argument because CrossFit is, in a lot of ways, a pain sport. Also, they'll say that CrossFit is not going to help you with the skills and the movement quality, or that steroids are not going to help you with movement quality and the skills that CrossFit requires. And so they'll use that argument, and they'll use a lot of arguments as to why steroids are not important for the sport of CrossFit. Now, what I want to say is that, to me personally, there is not a better sport suited for steroids and performance-enhancing drugs. There is literally not a sport on the planet that is better for steroids and performance-enhancing drugs. There's not a sport on the planet that you would benefit from the use of those drugs more than the sport of CrossFit. Now, does that mean that Rich Froning and Matt Frazier and Tia Toomey and Katrin Davidsdottir and all the top athletes in CrossFit of all time, or does that mean that they're using steroids and PEDs? No, that does not mean, by saying that CrossFit is one of the sports that would benefit the most from PED use, does not say that all those athletes are on steroids. Now, so this is something that I have debated on back and forth for years. So this is something that I have debated on internally for years. So as of today, as of shooting this video, I've never done steroids in my life. I have never done any kind of PED, any kind of SARM, any kind of anything. The only thing that I have done is a lot of different supplements. So I do, if you watch my supplement video, I've experimented around with all kinds of different supplements. But, so I don't have experience with use, but I have done a pretty deep dive over the years in trying to figure out and figure this thing out and try to learn essentially how to tell if somebody's on PEDs or not, and really I've been on this quest to try to figure out if those top athletes are in fact on performance-enhancing drugs. So I love CrossFit. I love the sport of CrossFit. I love the athletes in CrossFit. I'm a huge fan of Rich Froning, a huge fan of Matt Frazier. I'm a huge fan of those people, Tia Toomey, and I just want to start by saying that I believe that the human body is capable of some crazy and wild things. And I've seen that in my own life, being a person that wasn't super, I mean, I was always somewhat athletic. I was never like super weak or anything, but I was never like super strong. And to see that after 15 years of working out and training my body and messing with different training methodologies, to see what my body has been able to do and what my body's been capable of compared to what I thought it could do, I've broken a lot of mental barriers and what I thought were physical barriers, and have just done what I thought was the impossible for myself, right? As somebody who, when I first started working out, to me, a 225-pound squat was really, really crazy heavy. I don't even know if I could do it when I couldn't do it when I first started working out. And to get to a point where I back squatted 400 for 5 reps and my bar speed looked pretty good and probably had more left in the tank, was pretty amazing for me to see. And all kinds of other strength feats. I have worked out, or my daughter used to train at a gym, Mash Elite Performance, where a lot of Team USA athletes and coaches train there. And I've seen young athletes like Morgan McCulloch and Ryan Grimsland and Hannah Dunn and countless other young athletes at the time. They were, 13, 14 years old, somewhere in that age range, maybe even younger at some of the time periods that I was there. And I watched these young athletes perform amazing feats of strength, knowing good and well that they had good parents, they had good coaches, and that they did not have them on performance-enhancing drugs or PEDs of any kind. And so it really showed me what the human body is truly capable of. And I've seen some genetic freaks in CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting that I know these people were not on PEDs. I'm 99.9% sure of it. And they were still able to do amazing things, like watching a 13, 14-year-old kid clean and jerk 315 pounds. Things like that were just amazing. So I know the body's capable of some crazy things. And I know that a lot of people accuse others of being on steroids just because those people are able to do things that they cannot do, right? If I can only back squat 400 for 5 and then I watch a guy squat 500 for 5, a lot of people automatically accuse them of being on steroids because, oh, they can do more than me, they must be on steroids. So I'm not bringing that into this conversation. I hate that as a trainer, as a coach, as an athlete. I can't stand when people think that I'm on steroids just because I have lifted more than them. And people turn to steroids quickly just because they think that everyone is on them and assume that everyone is on them. Because I think that you really should spend a lot of time trying to find your genetic potential, because it can take a really long time to get there. I worked out for years without seeing a lot of gains, and then all of a sudden I reached a point in my mid-20s where I was in my prime and I really started to get strong, and I started to get on some smart strength training programs and learn more about programming for strength, and my strength shot through the roof. My strength went up, all my muscle mass went up. Even though I wasn't doing muscle building programs, I think I built a lot of fast twitch fibers, things like that. Anyways, there you can just train for a long time. Give it your due diligence. Don't just jump on steroids thinking that everybody's doing them. I know in certain sports, like if you're going to be a professional bodybuilder at the highest level, that I know that yes, you are going to have to do performance-enhancing drugs in certain divisions if you want to be successful, and that's just the way it is. And in the bodybuilding world, they are more transparent about that. And if you dive into it, you'll realize that is the case. It's something that I always kind of knew, but once you really dive into it, and a lot of the YouTube videos that I've done and the people that I've listened to, it's just fact that in certain divisions you're going to have to do performance-enhancing drugs. In other sports, such as CrossFit, that is a little bit more quiet. It's a little bit more hush-hush, right? There have been people busted in the sport, but they have never been really the top names in the sport that got busted for PEDs. So it's a little bit more hush-hush. It's a little bit more quiet. It's a little bit more of a mystery in the sport of CrossFit. So do I think that the top athletes in the sport of CrossFit are using steroids? To this day, I am not sure. I love Matt Fraser. I'm a big fan of Matt Fraser. I don't have any reason to believe that when he says he has not taken performance-enhancing drugs that he's lying. I just seeing his interviews, man, he just seems like a super genuine person. What I'll say, and this is to compliment him in a lot of ways, if he didn't use PEDs, this is a huge compliment to him. His performance in CrossFit was so ridiculously dominant that it would be naive and stupid of me to 100% assume that he's not on PEDs or didn't cheat and take PEDs, right? It would be naive and ridiculous of me to not at least question that when you look at his dominant performance against the top athletes in the world and against some top athletes that did get popped and busted for PEDs, right? Like Ricky Garrard back in, I don't know what year it was, but he got busted for PEDs, right? And Matt Fraser beat him that year. And so while I love Matt Fraser, and I like to think that he didn't do PEDs, he didn't use, his performance was so ridiculously dominant that you have to at least question it if you're really trying to journey and find the truth of that, right? So let's talk about some common misconceptions. I think that some people think that if you use steroids that you're automatically going to blow up and be massive like Ronnie Coleman, right? You're just going to be huge and puffed up and big, and it's going to slow you down and not be good for CrossFit. With diving in and watching, now there's so much material on the internet about performance enhancing drugs and steroids and SARMs and all these things. It's easy to find out that you can do all these things without putting on that big amount of muscle mass, right? There's different drugs that do different things, that have different purposes. You know, how big you get depends on what you eat, how many calories you're taking in, how many calories you're burning. There is genetics and all kinds of factors. So let's just put that to rest, that you can't just look at somebody and tell that they're on PEDs. That's another thing that CrossFit has tried to seem to use as an argument and say that hey, looking at somebody like Patrick Vellner, for example, since he's not this super jacked dude with all this muscle and super ripped, don't get me wrong, takes his shirt off, the dude looks like a straight athlete, but he's not, he doesn't look like C-Bomb, or he doesn't look like Arnold, and so people kind of use that as an excuse to say that he's not on performance enhancing drugs. But of course, you look at Lance Armstrong, and did Lance Armstrong look like Arnold Schwarzenegger? No. And so you can use these performance enhancing drugs and not look like it. So let's just get that knocked out of the way. It's 100% possible to use PEDs without looking like a steroid freak, as people like to imagine them. So you can't judge it based on that. So what are some other common misconceptions or ideas that people think? So one of the things that I immediately think of is that in the sport of CrossFit, you have to be good at everything. And so one of the things that people say is that you wouldn't really benefit that much from taking steroids, because in CrossFit you have to have tons of skill, and so you don't yeah, sure, you got to be strong, but you have to have tons of skill and tons of endurance, right? Well, the thing about it is, in CrossFit you have to be good at everything, and so that means you have to be practicing everything all the time. You've got to be good at gymnastics, you've got to be good at handstand walks, but you've also got to be able to strict press a lot of weight. You've also got to be able to jerk. So let's just think about movements that involve the shoulders alone, okay? Just the shoulders alone. You've got to be able to do lots of muscle ups, ring muscle ups, also bar muscle ups. You've got to be able to handstand walk. You've got to be able to do handstand push-ups. You've got to be able to strict press. You've got to be able to jerk. You've got to be able to snatch. You've got to be able to overhead squat. You have got to be able to even, when you look at the endurance, ergs, ski erg, the rower, the bike, even double unders, jump rope, rope climbing, pull-ups, now bench press is involved in CrossFit, dumbbell snatch, all the dumbbell movements. There are so many amounts of things, even a wall ball, right? There are so many movements. There are so many movements in CrossFit that involve just the shoulders. And so when you think about all those movements you have to be good at, there's not enough capacity. There's for one, there's not enough time in the day to be elite at all those things, and in just an hour of training a day, right? You can't just train an hour a day and be elite at all those things. And that's just shoulder, that's just some random movements, right? That doesn't even include all the movements in CrossFit that involve your legs, that involve hinging, you hinge so much in CrossFit, the axial fatigue from bending over and hinging so much in CrossFit, and the pressure on the lower back, all those things, and you have to practice all these movements all the time, constantly. So you can't be elite by training 1 hour a day. So basically, when you look at all the movements of CrossFit, to be good at all the aspects of CrossFit at that highest elite level, you're going to have to train, for, I would say, a minimum of 3 to 4 hours a day. That's actual training time. That's not including your recovery time. That's not including your mobility work. That's not including, that's really not even including just strictly skill work. That's like low intensity skill work, but like 3 to 4 hours of solid training time a day. Now, this is where steroids are extremely important, because steroids and performance enhancing drugs are going to give you that ability to be able to train more and more and more frequently and recover faster, and to be able to attack those workouts more frequently. So if I'm on performance enhancing drugs and I complete a 2-hour grueling workout where I've done tons of strength work and some CrossFit Metcons, that would beat me down. I know I'm 36 years old, but I've got a long training age. I can handle a decent amount of volume, and that would beat me down. But would help. Imagine if I had steroids and performance enhancing drugs to help me to recover faster, and therefore, boom, I could just go right back. I could finish that 2-hour session and then go eat, recover, come back, and then do plenty of skill work and be able to do that skill work effectively. Now, for me, I've never been able to do that because my shoulders feel like they're about to fall off. Typically, the shoulders are just annihilated all the time doing CrossFit type workouts. So I can't even work on that skill work of just doing something simple like handstand walks, or I've just got so much overall fatigue that, doing those type of movements, just your whole body's aching and hurting and you're not performing at a high level, right? And so you're just not able to practice, and then you just beat yourself down, and you beat yourself down into a point of overtraining. So like for CrossFit is one of the sports that would benefit from steroid use and PED use the most, just for the simple fact that you can recover faster and you can train more and more and more and more. And that doesn't mean you're just heavy training, right? You're just doing all the squats and snatches and Olympic lifts, but you're able to do all your skill work too. And that counts for something, even in a sport like jiu-jitsu. And even if you're not like training and going hard and rolling, sparring at 100% against each other, like it just beats your body up. And so the PEDs help greatly, because now you can just train for hours and hours and hours on end, and then you wake up the next day and you're recovered and you're ready to go again, right? So that's one area where steroids are going to help in CrossFit tremendously. In CrossFit, you've got to be good at endurance, you've got to be good at strength, like you've got to be good at the skills, you got to be good at the gymnastics, you got to have good cardio, you got to be good at everything. And it's really hard to pull everything up at one time. And that's where performance enhancing drugs would help. As you take these combinations and stacks of performance enhancing drugs, you are going to be able to build up your strength and your endurance, your local muscle endurance, your cardio, and you're going to be able to bring up all these things at the same time. And so it's going to help you to be able to, again, and it all goes back to predominantly from recovery and having the energy to keep attacking that training at a high intensity. If I'm super beat down and say I'm supposed to hit bike intervals today, and my bike intervals are supposed to be at 72 RPMs, and I'm supposed to hold that amount of RPMs for 5 minutes straight, and then I'm doing 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off intervals for 5 rounds, and I go to get on the bike, and because I'm so beat down and I'm so tired, all I can hold is 63 RPMs, well, then there's really no point in me actually training at that intensity level that day, because I'm not actually having that output, so I'm not really getting that performance benefit from that workout. So that there again, that's where if I can recover, if I'm on steroids and performance enhancing drugs and I'm recovered and I can hit that RPMs today, and it allows me to, as Greg Doucette says, train harder than last time. You always want to train harder than last time, train harder than last time. Well, you know, if you're natty and you've been training for as long as I have, that you just cannot go that hard every day. You cannot always train harder than last time, and you've got to back off a lot, and you got to have more deload weeks, more rest weeks, and it seems at 36 that the older you get, the more you have to have those rest days, and the more you have to have those deload weeks and things like that, because you just go into that hole and that training deficit, and you get into that systemic fatigue and all that too fast. So would performance enhancing drugs would 100% help in the sport of CrossFit. So you look at these guys and, and they say that they're not taking performance enhancing drugs. Another argument is that there is testing in the sport of CrossFit, that CrossFit tests for steroid use, a test for PEDs, right? And that supposedly, from the people that I've listened to, is a little bit of a joke. Because I've heard guys, if you listen to that podcast from John Romano on steroids and CrossFit, you listen to a lot of the guys that are in that world of PEDs, they say that basically the drug tests in sport are an IQ test. Basically they say if you fail the drug test that you're an idiot, and that they're super easy to pass, super easy to get by with those tests. Even if you do, steroids for 3 or 4 years, and then you go off of them completely. If you do things right, you're still going to retain a lot of those gains that you got from doing those performance enhancing drugs. So they can cycle off, and I'm sure there's other ways to beat those tests. So they say they can beat them super easily, and CrossFit, I think they use their own agency at this time to do their testing. They use their own agency. So they're not using like USADA or WADA or one of these outside organizations that specializes in drug testing for athletes all across the world. USADA and WADA, I think, I'm not an expert in this, but I think they're the best in the world at testing, and people still beat those tests all the time, right? We find out, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later that an athlete, they still have his blood samples or urine samples, and they find that 10 years ago he was using banned substances, and so now they strip him of his medal, right? And that still happens. So people are still beating those tests at the highest levels at WADA and USADA. You think that they can't beat the drug tests that CrossFit is using? And on top of that, there's also accusations that CrossFit is covering it up for their top athletes. And, that's a conspiracy theory. And of course, you can't, it's hard to prove. And I'm not going to say that that's necessarily true, but CrossFit would have motive for covering that type of thing up and throwing away tests. They're in control of it. So an organization like USADA and WADA are not, they're not gathering the tests and regulating those tests. So CrossFit essentially could select. And if Matt Frazier failed a test, they could just throw that one out. If Rich Froning failed a test, they could just throw that one out. And CrossFit would have motive to do that because CrossFit claims that their methodology of training is essentially the best method of training. And so, and I know that's one thing that attracted me to CrossFit. I remember seeing a female, specifically Stacy Tovar. I remember seeing her physique, and I was like, as a male who had worked out for 8 years at the time, I was like, man, I wish my physique looked like hers, right? And so to me, that was like, wow, CrossFit really gets you jacked looking in a nice functional way. It makes you look like an athlete. And so I was attracted to it, right? But let's see, where was I going with that? So when people look at CrossFit and they see those top athletes and they're not fit or they're not in shape or they're doing some other training methodology that's not working for them, they see Matt Frazier, they see Rich Froning, they see Tia Toomey, they see these athletes and they're like, whoa, I want to look like that. They are jacked. Whoa, they are fit. Whoa, they are strong. Man, they are fit, strong, fast, enduring. Like, they are like Batman. They are like super soldier. They can literally do it all. And so CrossFit has a lot of benefit from that because the more people that see that and believe in the methodology, they're going to come to the sport. They're going to go to the gyms. They're going to compete in the CrossFit Open. They're going to compete and try to go to the games. They're going to tune in. They're going to buy merch, all those things, right? So CrossFit has a lot to gain from that. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a conspiracy theory, but CrossFit could be covering up those folks that are failing those tests and just overlooking them. So that's one possibility there. So people could definitely be passing the tests. CrossFit could be covering up the tests. You can't look at people and tell 100% sure if they are not on steroids. You can look at some people and tell that they are because they're mass monsters. like Ronnie Coleman. But like if you just look at the average jacked person, it's really just hard to tell if somebody's natty or not. So, and this is something that I've looked into quite a bit. I've never actually seen steroids in 15 years of working out. Never seen steroids in the gym. Never had anybody come up and offer me steroids. But through watching all these YouTube videos and doing all this digging and diving in, trying to learn more about PEDs, I do realize that they are quite readily available. So that's another thing, is that it's very easy to obtain these different PEDs and steroids. And I know some are probably more difficult to obtain than others, but you can literally just get this stuff online, and SARMs are something that you can just get a lot of times at your local nutrition store or gym. So not super hard to get a hold of, and you can legit get a lot of performance enhancement from them. Let's see, what else? I don't think I've got anything else in mind when it comes to CrossFit, steroids, PED use. You know, there is PED use in all kinds of other sports, right? Baseball, people have been caught in baseball, football, you know, track and field, cycling, bodybuilding. We know people are using powerlifting. We know people are using Olympic lifting. Why would people not be using CrossFit? I mean, it's just super naive to think that they wouldn't be. But if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, rebuttals, anything about this topic, it is a topic that I love. I would love to dive in and do another video. So if you want to shoot some comments, some questions, rebuttals, any of that stuff, please shoot it my way. And so that way I can take those comments, put them together, and then just take another video, because this one I was just kind of shooting off the hip. It's a topic that I've been into for a while. I would love to have somebody beside of me to talk about the topic. So I may do that too, bring somebody in to just shoot back and forth and have some conversation about the topic as well. If you like the video, please hit that like button. If you want to follow more content from me, hit that subscribe button. And thank you for tuning in.